And here we are. Welcome, everybody. This is the launch of our LinkedIn Live version of Leveraging Thought Leadership. So I want to welcome you all here. And I'm really excited to kick this off with two folks that I've had the privilege of working with and I would consider friends and people I admire and respect greatly for their accomplishments pre-thought leadership and then during thought leadership. So let me start with Shannon. So Shannon is an author of a book called The Grit Factor. She's the founder of the Grit Institute, and she's an amazing keynoter. And then she was one of the first women to fly an Apache helicopter in combat. So that's officially badass in my world. That's amazingly cool. More importantly, she's an amazing human being and does all sorts of cool fundraising in her local community and is raising her kids and doing all sorts of cool stuff. And then we've got another old friend, Jan Rutherford. Jan is a former Green Beret and an author as well. His book was called The Littlest Green Beret. Now, every time I tell people I've worked with a guy that wrote a book called The Littlest Green Beret, they always ask, why did he write a book called The Littlest Green Beret? That's also part of his bio. He became one of the youngest at 17 Green Berets, and he weighed only 114 pounds when he did it, which led me to believe just on the weight category, I might have been able to be a Green Beret in second grade, but probably not. So I want to welcome you both here and thank you for taking your time out of your schedules. What I thought I would start with is the importance of sort of laying down the foundation of a solid strategy before you dive into this thought leadership universe. So any thoughts on that? Maybe start with Jan.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I lead expeditions with executives and military veterans, and the big takeaway is always you've got to slow down to speed up. And I think that's going into business. I mean, there's a certain part of you basically taking a step back. And I remember, meeting you, Peter. It was at a National Speakers Association meeting, and you had this talk. And, I remember one of the first things you said was, how many of you are making $100,000 a year speaking or from your book? Nobody raised your hand. And you went in this whole thing about, what thought leadership really means. And it was before, people were talking about influencers.
Right.
And what it really meant, to be a thought leader. And it's funny how over the years since you first introduced that concept, I've realized that anybody that's even in sales these days, anybody that's an entrepreneur has to be a thought leader if they're going to move their business forward. And I just got off the phone today with a CEO, an up and coming, great immigrant story, everything. And he said, I need to get out there with my story more. Mm-hmm. So, and it's interesting. I mean, part of it is really taking an assessment at the very beginning and figuring out, what is it that I want to do with whom and why, and then figuring all the, the details out. And I think that's what I remember you really helping me take a step back.
Well, thank you. Shannon, how would you think about that? I think you're mute. There we go.
Yeah, I think Jan's points are excellent. I have tended to continue to iterate, I would say, as I go, which is just how I tend to do things. But at the same time, one of the things that I see people early on in their careers in this area doing that I think they could do better is that you have to think about the ways that, not that you just have good ideas or that you have interesting experience, but both how do you convey those experiences in a way that another person can receive them. And that means understanding those other people and what their needs are and what their environments are. It also means boiling things down, because I hear so much kind of these summary experiences in many cases, or stories that only have to do with kind of the story itself, as opposed to how does this actually add value to somebody else? How can I translate this in a way that is now meaningful and tactically helpful or strategically helpful for another person in another realm? And I think that's a real opportunity to get that in place before you get out there.
Yeah, and I love that. I want to push on what, when you mentioned other people, one of the things that we work on the front end is getting really specific with those other people, right? So on the one hand, could everybody benefit from reading both of your books? Sure. Is it efficient for both of you to focus on getting your work out into the universe to everyone? Probably not, because, as far as I know, you don't have the budgets of Coca-Cola behind you. So you have to figure out who is most important, who are your avatars, who you're trying to serve, and how everything that you do from a strategic perspective is focused on getting your messaging to them, the right format, the right modalities, all those sort of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to comment on something that you said a moment ago, Jan, about, well, it seems like everybody is a thought leader. And I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think there's a place for everyone to experiment and work with thought leadership. And I think, whether you're whether you're in sales, particularly in sales where you're more front facing, it's the ultimate antidote to commoditization, because it doesn't matter what you do, right? Whether you're in professional services or commodities or selling software, technology, whatever, we're all facing commoditization. And I always believe that thought leadership is a way to sort of punch above your weight and decommoditize, because now you're just another guy selling me tech. No, you're another guy selling me tech, but that Jan guy has a point of view, and that's stuck in my mind. So.
Well, I think, to me, if you're a leader in any way, shape, or form, if you're a teacher in any way, shape, or form, or if you're a salesperson, any way, shape, or form, you're trying to influence other people, and hopefully for noble reasons, that you think what you have is of value. It's going to make people's lives better in some way, shape, or form. And so, again, if you're just looking to transact, hey, I've got an idea and I want you to buy it, whether you're a leader, teacher, or salesperson, I think people are going to push back. But if you're a thought leader, you've recognized patterns, you've thought about something, you've presented a unique point of view, and you can tug on the strings of what's in it for me and the drivers of other people.
Sure.
I think you can move people, and so, again, I think, there's not enough room for everybody to be an influencer, but maybe in different ways there are. And more than ever, I mean, what you're partly trying to overcome is people that don't have as open of a mind as you would like.
Right.
So you're trying to speak their language. I mean, and I look at, what I've been doing for the past 10 years. I mean, it's still iterating, as Shannon said.
Sure.
And right, just this past week, I'm like, I think what I do falls into 3 buckets, and here's what I'm seeing. And I'm constantly trying to figure out, I am constantly trying to figure out what makes a leader. I mean, that's a forever quest.
Well, and those buckets change. So Shannon, I'll go to, your primary bucket, or one of your primary buckets in Jan's language a year and a half ago, was keynote speaker. Then we had this little inconvenience called COVID. And unless you were able to convince, 300 or 500 people to show up on your front lawn and hear you talk, you probably had to make some changes to the flight plan, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, last year was a great forcing function in the sense that after 6 months of complete dead, total quiet, we started to work virtually, and we started to do keynotes virtually, and we found ways to make those really inspiring and interesting and engaging. And actually, I sort of loved that opportunity. It was another way to engage more broadly in some regards. But then it was also the opportunity to launch into doing some leadership facilitation online, and developing workbooks and developing courses that really engaged people where they were, and met needs that weren't being met, and went deeper into some of the material as well. So it was launching the book, it was taking the keynotes, and then going now into this place where this leadership facilitation with both online courses and facilitated courses has been a really amazing way to blow it out. And there was certainly stress in the development of it, based on the timeline, but really exciting stuff. And it's been amazing to see the traction that it gets.
Yeah. If I could, Peter, one of the things that supposedly only the CEO can do is interpret the meaningful outside. And I think over the last 18 months, we've all had to figure out, how do we interpret the meaningful outside? In other words, what is the market saying? And, the best advisor I've had is my wife, and she always says, the market will tell you what it values. And it's been clear, totally over the course of my journey for 10 years, what the market values in me is different than what I wanted it to be at the beginning. And then I sort of gave into it, and I went, this is what the market values. And this is what I'm going to reinforce and put more oomph behind. And it's been, it's sort of remarkable. And, I think for budding entrepreneurs, it's, that they have an idea of what they want it to be, but boy, they really need to be open to the fact that there's going to be things that push back against it, or things that are easier, and to pay attention to that.
No, I think that's well said. And in terms of that shift of the market, there's totally different expectations between what the buyer of a keynote back in the old days was looking for. It's, hey, we believe your story. This is cool. Come out for an hour or 45 minutes, be engaging, be entertaining, inspire the troops, if you will, and then go home, right? Now, they might take that same money or even some multiple of that investment and say, you know what? We're not doing that anymore for lots and lots of reasons, but I'll make that investment in you if you can develop the capabilities in my people that enable them to develop a skill that drives a business outcome. Totally different formula. Totally different game. So could either of you speak to that? Because I know you've both gone through that transformation.
Well, and Peter, I'm actually literally sitting in the lobby of a conference center after having just delivered a keynote. So keynotes are not gone at all. And in fact, they've come back both live and virtually in some pretty meaningful ways. But it's nice to be able to augment that with going deeper with the learning, and going deeper, of course, the book was the result of years of research. And so that is what I've been speaking on anyway for a while. But it is great to have a several pronged approach. And I think you helped me see that early on.
Thank you. And then you mentioned, did you have something on that, Jan? Because I had another question.
I think, it's interesting because, I have so many people, CEOs, basically saying to me these days is, you know what, I need to scale. I went to Harvard, I went to Wharton, I went here, I went there.
Right.
Jan, what does scale mean? How do I do it? and they're not being sarcastic. They're like, how do you do it? And there's a lot of things I say, but one of the more cliche things is, hey, if you want to grow your organization, you grow your people. Let's really look at that. But it's a real struggle right now because we know there's a crazy 35-40% attrition in some of the tech firms.
Yes.
And so they're thinking, do I really want to invest in these folks for my competitors? And I think again, what I think has happened is that in addition to learning and all that, that a lot of people have let the culture go by default, over the last 18 months. It's kind of like, where they'd have rules and unspoken rules about how they interact when they were all together. They've let it all go by the wayside. And so now they have these cultures that are sort of decayed. And then they're wondering why it's so hard to bring them back and create learning and produce better outcomes in their people. So there's a lot going on. And again, I'll wrap this up is I think everybody wants a quick fix. Yeah. And there isn't a quick fix. And I'll tell you, there's been plenty of times I've said, I know you want training. Training is not going to fix this.
Right.
Well, and when they say training, they'll say, great, so this has been going on for 5 years here. Our people have a lack of trust or their silos or whatever. Could you come in 45 minutes and fix all the ails? Like, that's just a ridiculous expectation, right? Like it's just, we've all learned things. We've all mastered things. We've all developed capabilities. No one's done it in 5 minutes. I want to touch on book because there's lots and lots of discussions in books. In fact, there's an article in the Times yesterday around the supply chain finally hitting the publishing industry. You can't even get like crazy stuff. So Jan, when I met you, your book was already locked and loaded and done. Shannon, your book was sort of a concept when we first met, and you've both done really, really well with the book. But I want to talk about sort of maybe just the journey, right? Because I think there's this thing of, I have to write a book. And I think the answer is no, you have to write the book you want to write for the right reasons at the right time. So,
yeah. I don't know if you
first hit at that, Shannon? Yeah.
I think it's helpful to have one for sure in the way that I work in the world, but I think of myself as a writer and an idea person, and that's very much who I am. I think there are other people who do well and don't necessarily need to go that path, but I have really, I love it. So I think you've got to do the things that you love to do, right? And I love to work with ideas. I love to work with people and to develop that into ideas that other people can, I hate to use the word consume, but that's what people use lately for content, right? But I love to form ideas and stories in meaningful ways that make an impact in people's lives. And so because of that, the book was a natural extension of that. So.
Yeah. Great. And Jan, what was your book experience?
Well, I wrote the book for me. originally. I mean, I knew I always wanted to write it. I wrote it for me. It was based on the course I taught at the University of Colorado for MBA students. And I knew I needed a platform. I knew that was the ticket. And I remember thinking, should I get a PhD? Should I write a book? And I went the book route. But since then, I've written a chapter in another book that was just published in the UK called Purposeful People. And I'm working on another book with a co-author on the Crucible expeditions we've run. And we're collecting of the 200 plus people that have been on our trips. We're collecting their stories and we're tying those into a book because everybody can't go on our expeditions, but we want them to experience what we learn when a group of really great people come together and form a team. So now I'm motivated in a different way to get a message out. And again, there's no, I don't have bestseller aspirations or any, I want people to know what happens on these trips, what's so remarkable, and how it might be replicated in the regular business world. So,
the point that you made about, and I wrote it for myself, I think that's a critical piece, meaning, one of the benefits of writing a book, and there's many, is it's a forcing mechanism, right? To get it tight, to get it concise, to be able to say, is that the best way to either tell the story of the point I'm trying to make, or what is it that I'm trying to get done? What is it that I'm trying to say? How am I trying to say it? So I think that do it for yourself is a good piece as well.
Yeah.
And Jan, I love hearing you talk about the ideas and what you've just contributed to with the title, as well as what you're looking at as the Crucible. And I would say one thing that I feel like, and I hope this isn't an unpopular opinion, I worked hard with the grit factor, knowing that, I have one experience and that's filtered through my own lens and my own time that I served. And so I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted that to inform the story, of course, but and how I deliver it. But it really ended up being, dozens of other people that were willing to contribute stories and ideas. So that it became about the concepts and the ideas. And I think in a way, like we have enough stories about individual people's stories, and they're all, very necessarily unique to that person. And I think that focus on the idea is really what I would recommend anybody who wants to be in thought leadership focus on. Not you have to tell it through your own story, of course, but it can't be about you. And there's a lot of people that want things to be about them, but it's about the idea, and you're just relaying the idea in a unique way. So that would be one thing I would mention about writing.
So that's a key point. So stay there for a minute, because I always joke that I have two types of clients. One group wants us to make them incredibly relevant, and one wants us to make them irrelevant. And I think your point that you're making, Shannon, is kind of making yourself irrelevant, meaning there are folks out there where the stage presence is kind of shtick, and there's a place for that. I'm not judging. It's entertaining, it's fun. They do some things, they can juggle, whatever. But I think ultimately the test that time will tell is, can this IP, can these stories stand up? I don't need to be the only delivery vehicle. If I'm not on stage, there's other ways that this information can be conveyed. And it's interesting because, Jan, your world with the Crucibles, there's nothing more experiential than going off into the wilderness for 3 or 4 days, but that's limited, right? You can't have 1 million people do that. And Shannon, your stories as well, right? Telling the pressure of being an Apache helicopter. Okay, well, we can't all ride along for that.
And also it's that's too easy to replicate. Like there's 1 million now. There's a lot of people in both of our areas with similar backgrounds and experience that are telling stories, and that's great. But it's got to get beyond that story. The story is a delivery mechanism for the idea, and until you've done work to really tease out the idea and allow it to be delivered via story, I don't think you're in thought leadership. You're not in this space.
Yeah, I love that, because it has to, and I think one of the tests of that, Shannon, is this teachable, right? Because I will never have the experiences that you had earlier in life or that Jan had earlier in life, but that's not the point. Right? That's part of who you are, and that might be, from a marketing standpoint, a differentiator. But the reality is that what you're bringing to me, I could, I love your book, right? So there are things that I can take away from Grit and things that I can take away from Littlest Green Beret and use in my world, totally different context,
right?
Than your context,
Exactly. And that's the point. That's what makes it important, right? And hopefully relevant and impactful. So
Cool.
Well, it reminds me of the I think it was Charles Handy or someone said the only way you're going to be different 5 years from now is the people you meet and the books you read. And
Yeah, that's totally
again,
true.
I think you hit on a key point as far as the idea and the concept. I mean, we're all egocentric, and we can appreciate a good story, but at the end of the day, what's in it for me?
right.
Hmm.
And how's this apply to the problems, the challenges, the issues I'm dealing with?
Yes.
How do I use this information to be more effective, to be happier, more fulfilled? And I think
Exactly.
Yeah, no, well
that's
said.
always what we're trying to do. Just like you, Shannon, speaking today as a keynoter, I know you got up there and you thought, how do I engage the audience? It's all about them. It's actually not about me.
Exactly.
So,
That's right. Yeah.
Well,
And
and I
that
think
transition
that
is hard for some people to make, I think, but it's a critical one if it's going to work.
well, I want to touch on the point that it's hard for some to make. There are some keynoters that are amazing keynoters. They get on stage and
Yeah.
it's magical, right? However, it's them to X. Like the audience
Mhm.
is irrelevant. They're almost props and they know how to work the room. They know how to do all those things. And it's literally magical to watch. However, when you think about what does it take to be a great teacher? So, to move
Yeah.
that into a workshop experience or something else. And if you were, none of our greatest teachers were all about them. So I
Yeah.
think for some folks, it's just a different skill set to be
Right.
so other focused, right? So if you think about sort of servant leadership or servant teachership, if that's a word, an amazing moderator, amazing teacher, they're almost egoless. They're going in and they're waiting for your eyes to go wide and that light bulb to go
yeah,
off and know when to
Right.
push. And I think many people do have both skills, but I think there's a dominant sort of trait that some of us have.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting, Peter. You mentioned that. I think of the TED Talks that I've watched. I mean, some of them are really amazing, and then some of them you think, and I'm going to be sort of hypercritical here, is you think this sounds like a talk that was created for therapy. I mean, this
Right.
is your therapy talk, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as a thought leader, it's not about you. And
Right.
I think that's the shift. I mean, that I'd like to think that's happened for me over the last decade is, at the beginning, I mean, a lot of my talks were about, my past, my experiences. And I think part of that came from some insecurities. And I think
Hmm.
as you get out there and you learn more and you realize how you can really help people and you do help people and you start kind of being like a bee where you pollinate, you
Sure.
hear so many things
Yeah.
that you're out helping. I think that's where the experience gets a lot richer, and I think you become more effective. But
Yes.
I mean,
again,
it
you
could
got to get
be.
this is kind of what we preach in leadership all the time is self-awareness is three components.
Hmm.
It's knowing how you are, knowing how you affect other people, and then having the ability to self-regulate to deliver a response that's best for the team, not to satisfy
Yeah.
his pride or ego. So.
I do want to touch on your therapy piece because on more than one occasion, I have told a client, read your damn book. And I've actually sent clients their own books to read because I think at some level, for some, not all, the reason the thing that they're in is something that intrigued them. It might be something they had a challenge with or a struggle or they were fascinated with. Not all, but there's a reason some people are, experts in trust or resilience or agility or grit or whatever, right? It's not like your average dentist is probably not going to write a book on grit, right? It's
Yeah.
probably
No.
not going to happen. So I think there are some reasons, but I think to your point, Jen, there might be it's sort of a wisdom that comes with ages, where,
Yeah.
if you were to speak back to, yourself 25 years ago, it'd probably be a different experience,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Well, and I mean, the thing I think Shannon and I both have in common is, the adversity we've gone through,
sure.
um, you know, I mean, it can just pound you into the ground and humble you and kill you. And then at the same time, it
Right.
can make you stronger. And, I'm going to speak with someone later today and I want to ask them, hey, you had, real positive influence in your mother in your life. And then you had a teacher that was an awful person. I mean, and my question is, do you need both? Do you need both? I mean, to come out of this adversity and again, I mean, if we think about teaching and learning and workshops and in developing people, part of it is people have to make some mistakes. They have to stumble
Absolutely.
to learn. I mean, none of us, I mean, it's like the story of the high school winning the state championship. And so they're all over, they're celebrating, and the team came in second, is over here, and the coach says, I feel sorry for those guys. And they're like, what do you mean you feel sorry for them? They won. Like, they didn't learn anything. You came in second. You're going to have to deal with that your whole life. You will have learned something from this experience. And so, again, I mean, I think, that's one of the reasons I think adversity is resonated with a lot of us that came out of the military, because, those days were dark and they were hard, and, we got through it, and it's like, I think we're a better person because we did that. And I think we can help people realize, even like during a pandemic, like, hey, this is terrible. But coming out of it, we can be forged into something stronger and better.
Yeah. And that's a choice that each person has to make, right? And I think that is what the whether it's a book or a keynote or leadership facilitation, whatever it is, it's helping people understand that they have the agency to make that decision, to whether or not they're going to learn, whether or not you become better, whether or not you take that material and create something new and a new direction. So. But some people won't do that. So I do think maybe in a way that part of what we're doing with thought leadership is helping people to understand agency in a different way, new ideas that can help to propel them into in new directions that are meaningful and allow them to contribute. This is my new thing: is it's all about us wanting to be able to contribute our best in this world, and setting the conditions to do that for ourselves, for our team, for the people that we care about, for our organizations, and that's what leadership and people development is all about.
I love it. So as we start to wrap, I'd love to get a minute or two from each of you and speak to, there's someone out there that's either a Jan or a Shannon or both 10, 12, 15 years ago as you were beginning the journey. What would you wax poetic to those folks just about to embark on this journey of thought leadership? Oh, you want to go first, Shannon? There you go.
Sure. Yeah, why not? We're arm wrestling virtually. I would say, first of all, believe in yourself and your experiences. I think making the transition into any new arena can be challenging, and people can have a lot of doubts. And so believe in yourself and those experiences. And then, so there's a piece of ego in that. And then the second part is the humility to say, okay, I'm just one person and I had this one set of experiences. And how do I take that and make that meaningful and transformational for others? How can I make that connect for others in a meaningful way? And, I think about the stories that I tell now in my keynotes, even still today, to a degree, came from one of my very, 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 very first keynotes. And it was, I think the name of the conference was Leading from Any Seat. And that became the name of my keynote. And I thought about 3 stories for 3 points that would fit into that. And are they the most crazy and exotic stories? No, but they're the stories that tell the points and deliver the information in a way that people can really remember them and internalize them. So don't do too much. Believe in yourself, but then know it's all about others. And then think just about a few small things that can carry the ideas to be transformational in other people's lives.
I love it. Thank you so much. And Jan, no pressure, but
that's it. There is pressure. What I would say is, with the people that have this desire, is you've always been successful. You've gotten through things. You know what? You're going to continue to be successful. A lot of those strengths that got you where you are today are going to serve you really well. At the same time, some of those strengths are going to need to be throttled back. They will not serve you so well. So you need to have the self-awareness to figure out what strengths will work and which ones won't. And as I mentioned before, I think it's really listen to the market. Pay attention to what resonates with people. Somebody said to me, I forget who it was, maybe it was Tom Rath, but it was, listen to the questions that people ask you as you're getting ready to go, because that's going to tell you what people already value your expertise in. So really, really listen to the questions that people ask you. And that would be the advice that I would give myself. And as I always say to my wife, I'm like, I wish I had started this 10 years earlier. And she always says correctly, you weren't ready. You had to
Exactly.
go through a bunch of stuff that you went through to be where you are today. And, that's the other thing is, hopefully you have really good people around you that will be truth tellers.
Yes, exactly. Well, that was fantastic. So I want to thank you both, for your service, your esteemed service,
Oh,
and
yeah.
for sharing some time with us today and talking about your journeys. And if you haven't read either of their books, get it today. If you haven't experienced either of their works, check them out. They're amazing in their own right, and it was a privilege to have both of you on here today. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks,
Thanks, Jan.
Shannon.
Thanks, Peter.